You've probably used an Adobe app at some point. Photoshop, Premiere, Illustrator, they're everywhere. But what if I told you that the company behind those tools has quietly built a system that you can't escape from? And the craziest part is that you don't even own the software you pay for. You're literally renting your ability to create. And Adobe's making billions off that rent every single year. And that's not an accidental business model, it's by design. Over the past decade, Adobe has turned itself from a software company into something much bigger, a monopoly that controls almost every corner of the creative world with some shady tactics to keep users trapped. But how did a company that once empowered artists end up trapping them inside its own billion-dollar system? And why does it feel like there's no way out? In fact, the US government and the FTC have stepped in, accusing Adobe of hiding fees and charging users even when they tried to cancel. That's right, unsubscribe and you might still get billed.
Guess what? You opted in to give Adobe full usage rights to your private photos.
And it gives them the right to look at your pictures, your video, listen to your audio.
And just when creators thought it couldn't get worse, Adobe announced it's using your work, your photos, your designs, your art, to train its AI. Without clear consent, the company that built its empire on creative freedom may now be profiting from your creativity itself. So how did Adobe go from empowering artists to exploiting them? Let's break down the billion-dollar subscription trap that changed digital creativity forever. Before Adobe became this giant subscription empire, it sold the complete product. You'd buy a physical disk, install it, and that was it. No logins, no cloud syncing, no subscriptions. You owned the software. And it worked for years. It was a fair trade. Adobe built the tools, creators built the culture. By the late 2000s, Adobe wasn't just a company anymore. It was the creative standard. Every design school taught its tools, every studio relied on them, and every freelancer had them installed. Owning Adobe software wasn't optional. It was essential. But as Adobe's power grew, so did its ambitions. And soon, the company that once gave creativity to everyone would realize something even more valuable than software sales: recurring payments. By the early 2010s, Adobe had done it. They weren't just making software, they were the software. Every major designer, editor, and filmmaker relied on their tools daily. Adobe sat comfortably on top of the creative world. But there was one big problem. They had already sold their software to almost everyone who needed it. Once you bought Photoshop or Premiere, that was it. You paid once and you owned it forever. And from Adobe's perspective, that meant no more money from you next year. So they started thinking, what if we stopped selling software and started renting it instead? In 2013, Adobe dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the creative industry. They announced the end of Creative Suite, the boxed versions of Photoshop, Illustrator, and all the classics, and replaced it with something new: Creative Cloud. At first, it sounded revolutionary. All your tools synced to the cloud, constant updates, collaboration, seamless access from anywhere. It was marketed like the future: sleek, efficient, connected. But the downside, you couldn't own Adobe software anymore. You could only rent it with a monthly subscription. That single decision changed everything. For Adobe, it was a goldmine. Instead of relying on one-time sales every few years, they now had millions of users paying every single month. Predictable, recurring income that only grew over time. And for creators, it was complicated. Sure, automatic updates were great, but the moment you stopped paying, even for a month, your tools were gone. Your files, your projects, your creative freedom locked behind a paywall. This was the moment Adobe flipped the switch from being a creative partner to becoming a gatekeeper. But here's where things get interesting. Let's be real. Adobe didn't make this move just to make life easier for creators. At the end of the day, it's about one thing: predictable, never-ending money. Before 2013, Adobe sold software in boxes. You bought it once, maybe upgraded every few years, and that was it. But from a business perspective, that model sucked. Every new year started at zero. They had to convince people to upgrade, and most didn't. So when Adobe switched to the Creative Cloud subscription, everything changed. Now, instead of a one-time $600 sale, they had millions of people paying $50 a month. That's not a sale, that's a cash pipeline. Investors loved it. Wall Street loved it. Adobe's stock price exploded from about $35 in 2012 to over $500 by 2021. That's more than 1,000% increase, all powered by one thing: recurring revenue. In fact, Adobe's financial reports highlight something called annual recurring revenue, or ARR, a metric showing how much guaranteed income they'll collect from subscriptions in the next 12 months. In 2013, their ARR was about $911 million out of the $4 billion total revenue. By 2024, Adobe's revenue had skyrocketed to $21.51 billion with ARR of about $17.33 billion. That's nearly 9 times growth without selling you a single box again. The most notable aspect is that Adobe's profit margins are among the highest in the tech industry. In Q1 of 2025, their operating margin topped 35%, even beating Apple in some quarters. So Adobe's got everyone paying monthly now. But here's the thing most people don't realize. The real genius of the Creative Cloud model isn't the subscription fee itself. It's how hard it is to escape once you're in. See, Adobe doesn't just sell software anymore. It sells an ecosystem. Photoshop connects with Lightroom. Premiere talks to After Effects. Everything is tied together so tightly that switching becomes a nightmare. If you're a video editor, for example, you probably rely on Premiere and After Effects working hand in hand. You've got project templates, presets, plugins, even fonts, all synced to Adobe's cloud. Now imagine trying to move all that over to something else, like DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut. It's not just switching tools, it's like rebuilding your entire creative workflow from scratch. And Adobe knows that. That's why they built Creative Cloud around lock-in psychology, a system that rewards you for staying but quietly punishes you for leaving. For instance, if you want to cancel your subscription, you instantly lose access to your apps, even to the files you created in them. Sure, the files are still on your drive, but they're useless without Adobe software to open them. That's not an accident. It's a strategic dependency. Then there's the network effect. If you collaborate with other professionals, odds are they're also using Adobe tools. So even if you want to switch, your clients, coworkers, and project pipelines pull you right back in. It's the same psychological pattern you see in social media or gaming ecosystems. Once your world is built inside the system, leaving feels impossible, and it goes even deeper. Adobe uses tiered pricing to keep you upgrading constantly. Need just Photoshop? That's one price. But want Photoshop and Illustrator? Or maybe you edit video and need Premiere too. Suddenly the bundle looks like the best deal, until you realize you're paying for apps you never even open. And Adobe's marketing team, they're masters at making it sound necessary. Every few months, they drop new AI features, exclusive tools, or updates that make older versions feel outdated, even though they often work perfectly fine. Now, the most interesting part of this trap is when you decide to cancel your subscription. Nope, Adobe still goes after you. Let me break it down. There are hidden cancellation fees and confusing terms that were not clearly displayed to you when signing up. The trick lies in the fine print, those so-called monthly Creative Cloud plans. Adobe's annual billed monthly plan means you commit to a year, but you pay each month. If you cancel more than 14 days after your first payment, there can be a cancellation fee equal to 50% of the remaining contract obligation. So, if you're halfway through a $60 per month plan, Adobe can charge you about $180 just to walk away.
If I want to cancel my $15 per month plan, it costs me over $80 to cancel.
And I had to pay $14 cancellation fee? What? Really? Yeah, really?
For years, creators have complained about it, calling it Adobe's cancellation maze. Because what else could they do? Adobe was the industry. But then something started to change. Slowly, frustration began turning into rebellion. The hashtag #CancelAdobe began trending multiple times in early 2024. Creators were showing screenshots of being charged early cancellation fees even after trying to downgrade their plans. One user posted, "Adobe tried to charge me $150 for canceling my plan 2 days before it ended." That kind of story spread fast. By mid-2024, this mess exploded online. The backlash grew so big that the U.S. Department of Justice and the FTC stepped in, accusing Adobe of using dark patterns, deceptive design tactics that manipulate users into doing something they don't intend. The complaint called out hidden fees, buried terms, and intentionally misleading renewal pages. Adobe fired back, saying it disagrees with the FTC and that its process is transparent, insisting it only wants to deliver the best products and the most value to our customers. But here's where the story takes another turn. At about the same time, Adobe updated its terms of service. The update stated that Adobe could access users' content for its generative AI training. This term update added fuel to the fire because when most people read that, they panicked, thinking Adobe might be scanning or using their creative work to train AI models.
Well, it's official. I have severed all ties with Adobe. I've ended an almost 40-year relationship.
Now, I don't want to be caught off guard where they're just kind of slipping it in somewhere, and I just refuse to participate in anything that Adobe has, so I'm going to just delete it. I think
Artists were furious. Photographers, filmmakers, and designers flooded social media with posts saying they were leaving Adobe for good. Director Duncan Jones was equally irate. His post on Twitter called out Adobe for interfering with his movie and the ridiculous nature of demanding access to creators' work for the sole reason that they are using the company's software to produce that work. For many, it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust. The message was clear, and Adobe felt it. For the first time, their near-perfect image as the creator's brand started cracking. The company started simplifying parts of its cancellation flow and further elaborating on what had changed in its new TOS, and that it would not train Firefly AI models on user content. But the community wasn't buying it, because this time, the fight wasn't about features, it was about freedom. Freedom from overpriced subscriptions, freedom from corporate lock-in, freedom to create without permission. All in all, people don't mind paying for great tools, they just don't want to feel trapped. And maybe that's Adobe's real masterpiece, not Photoshop or Premiere Pro, but the art of never letting you go.
After all the backlash and the wave of people leaving Adobe for Affinity Photo, DaVinci Resolve, and Figma, the majority still found it hard to fully adapt to those alternatives. That's because all their initial creative work, their projects, workflows, and ideas were deeply rooted in Adobe's ecosystem. Some managed to make the move, but most found it difficult. One user even posted on Reddit, he really wants to leave Adobe, but can't because he has depended on Adobe software for 17 years across various creative tasks. A large part of his work is practically on Adobe. You can see many posts on Reddit about the same problem. Adobe isn't just a company that makes creative tools. It's the company that defines what creativity even looks like in the digital world. They haven't just become the standard, they've become the language of creativity itself.
Okay, guys, hold tight. Adobe earnings are out, and the stock is heading higher by about 6%. Haven't said that in a while. Mackenzie Segal.
That kind of dominance doesn't happen by accident. Let's rewind a bit. Over the last 2 decades, Adobe's strategy wasn't just to build great software. It was to eliminate or absorb anyone who could compete with them. Take Macromedia, for example. Back in the early 2000s, they were killing it with tools like Flash and Fireworks, powerful design programs that rivaled Adobe's products. In 2005, Adobe bought the entire company for $3.4 billion. Then came Behance, the go-to portfolio site for artists and designers. Adobe bought that too.
They even bought Frame, a platform used by video editors and production teams for cloud collaboration. Why? Because it sits perfectly inside Adobe's ecosystem. You upload your footage, you review it on Frame, and then edit it in Premiere. One seamless, inescapable loop. And these are just few instances because Adobe has acquired several creatives that tries to compete with them. The message was clear: if we can't beat you, we buy you. Need proof? Look at what happened when Adobe tried to buy Figma, one of the few design platforms that dared to challenge them. Adobe announced a $20 billion acquisition in 2022, saying it would enhance collaboration and innovation. But behind that corporate language, the message was clear: if we can't beat them, we'll buy them.
Adobe terminating its $20 billion deal to acquire the design software maker Figma. Let's get out west to Deirdre Bosa. That is the subject of today's Tech Check. Dee.
The deal fell apart under regulatory pressure. The EU and US antitrust bodies stepped in, worried that Adobe was trying to crush competition and stifle innovation. On December 2023, Adobe and Figma mutually terminated the merger agreement, admitting there was no clear path to regulatory approval.
So here's the million-dollar question. Can anyone actually take down Adobe? Because after everything we've seen, the subscriptions, the monopoly, the backlash, it feels like Adobe's sitting on a creative empire that's just too big to fall. But history says something different. Yeah, giants fall all the time. Not because they're weak, but because they stop listening. And that's the same mistake Adobe might be making right now. They've spent years optimizing for investors, not for the very people who built their empire, creators. If this video opened your eyes, hit that like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.